We've discussed the rules of POTA, researching parks for your POTA, acquiring, or in some cases not acquiring equipment for your POTA. Today, we actually get into the fun stuff, the activation itself. Let's go. Hi, my name's Mike. I'm a full-time traveler and ham radio operator. I activate amazing parks all over the United States. Join the adventure and see what's next.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
That traveler has
I just do things.
This is a huge, beastly, bulging man. Plates were from Kansas.
Hey folks, I'm Mike, Kilo Echo Zero, Victor, India Mike, and today we are discussing your first activation, and we're talking about the activation itself, your activation, and I'm stressing your activation because that concept is so key to this whole video. Just like ham radio itself, there are so many different directions that an activator can go within even the specific niche of a POTA activation. There's all kinds of different modes to use. There's all kinds of different bands to transmit on. There's all kinds of different styles of activating. Do you want to go fast and get a lot of contacts? Are you someone that likes to talk and rag chew? All these things are all possibilities. And that's why it's so important for you to understand it is your activation to do as you choose. You know, the modes are the easy ones. Do you want to do voice? Do you want to do CW? Are you going to run digital modes? There's, you know, that's the easier choice to make. Usually getting into it, we all know what we want to do in that regard. But let's just talk about voice for a moment. A lot of us go for a faster contest type style activation where we are trying to get a large number of contacts in as short a period of time as possible. So for me, it's not because I like to go fast. I'm generally trying to really slow myself down, but there's just so many people calling all the time. It's like you're running the cash register and there's just a line of people backed up. You're wanting to get through it as fast as you can so you can get people out the door and satisfy as many customers as you possibly can. That's why I generally like to go fast. And as the activation gets busier and busier, I've trained myself to shorten the exchanges as much as I can to try to get through it as fast as possible. What I'm going to try to do more of is getting myself to slow down and maybe get a little more conversational when the activation slows down a little bit. But that may be where you like to live. Maybe you want to ask someone what kind of radio they're running. What's the weather like in their location? What antenna are they running? And, you know, that's all fine. You might catch some hunters off guard because they may not be used to that, but I've seen plenty of comments where people will say things like, why don't people in POTA talk with each other? They just, you know, give their signal exchanger 5-9 Arizona, thanks, 7-3, moving on. And it doesn't seem very personal to them. And it is kind of surprising, actually, how you can actually get to know some people and develop some friends in Parks in the Air. And that's all you really say to each other is you know, hey, Bob, how's it going? You're 5-9 Arizona. But you hear familiar voices so many times, it just kind of happens. That connection still forms. So, and you'll hear people that are more conversational. I think Greg in California is, yeah, he's a nice compromise. He'll talk with you a little bit and give you an extra over or two to talk with him before he says 73, move on. And he's usually working a pretty good pileup. That's his style. That's what he likes to do. So don't be afraid to do something different or to operate in some way that you haven't heard most people operate. It's your activation. How long are you going to run? What part of the park are you going to be in? You're going to sit at a picnic table. You're going to be in your vehicle. You're going to set up on a tailgate. It's your activation. Never lose sight of that general concept. Remember, all you need is 10 legitimate radio contacts. They don't even have to be POTA hunters. You just need to talk to 10 people, however you want to do it. You may not want to call CQ. You might just hunt other parks. You might just call CQ and not say anything about POTA at all. That's totally legitimate. As long as you get 10 radio contacts, that's all that matters. You want to run a contest? You're going to do a state QSO party? It's fine. You don't have to tell anybody anything about Parks on the Air. I've done this a number of times where I'm working like a state QSO party is what I'm into right at the moment. And I'll just exchange the information for the state QSO party. I will add those contacts into my general log, and all the contacts that I've made while we're sitting in a park, I'll send it to Parks on the Air, and they all get counted. It's one of the great things about the program. The point is, there's so many different ways to go. And don't necessarily let anybody else tell you how you should do it. There's a lot of suggestions being made out there, and that's fine. I hear a lot of people suggesting different modes and different bands. You'll hear people out east say, oh, all I need to do is QRP on 40 meters and I can get all the contacts I want. Well, that's nice when you're in a huge populated area. When you're out west, like I am here now, that don't work too hot. The population isn't anywhere close to what you folks have out east. So if I do even run power on 40 meters in the middle of the day, I'm listening to static. Okay, so that basic concept is behind us. The way I would suggest that you start every activation is on the tailgate of your vehicle, assuming your vehicle has a tailgate. If not, make one up. I start every activation on the tailgate. I set up my radio station. I put all my gear on the tailgate. I set up my radio. I got the mock set up here. Got the radio listening to, I think that's the YL net. Be quiet here. And we're transmitting. So we got an operational station. I set up my antenna for the most part. I hook everything up. I turn my radio on. I pan around and listen for some signals. Okay, if I've got my vertical antenna up, maybe I just don't put the radials out on the ground. They're attached. I still have them there, so I know I got them, but they're still coiled up. And I'll listen for a signal, so that way I can make sure I've got all the components I need to make that radio work when I get out into the field. All I need to make sure is I've got some way to log. Generally, I'll have my laptop. I'll have, as a backup, my Write in the Rain notebook in my bag. And, you know, I've always got my phone with me too. If I'm hiking, I might leave the notebook just because I'll have my phone. I'll need it for recording, so I can always log on Polo in my phone, and that could be my backup. But every time I do that, I know I've got a working station. I will not have any problems. I am not a person, again, this is me, this is my activation. I am not a person who practices the notion of 2 is 1 and 1 is none. I'm usually going out there with 1 of everything. But because I test it on that tailgate before I leave, I've never failed to complete an activation because something broke or something wasn't working. I did have my original whip for the Wolf River coils came apart as I was extending it, as I was setting up for my mock, what I call my mock setup before I leave. So do that every time, and you'll never get out in the field missing a container or your battery's dead. You know, you've got all those things together. You've checked them all. I always pick up my microphone too and push it and make sure it works. Okay, if you're doing CW, maybe you pick up your key and you push it and make sure, you know, everything there is working. It is hooked up and working fine, and you'll be good when you get out in the field. Then you just make sure everything that's out there stays together. You know, if I'm hiking for my activation, I'll take my hiking pack and make sure all those components get into the hiking pack. Nothing goes back into any other cases. Nothing comes back into the RV. It all goes into my pack, so I know I got my station. Those two right there that I've told you right there are the 2 best tips I can give you for your first activation. All right, your number 1 enemy for any activation, be it your first or any for the rest of your career, the number 1 thing that will blow up your activation is time. Having a tight time window is the easiest way to not be able to get 10 contacts. It sounds obvious, but that's almost 100% the case. Again, because I get out there with all my equipment working, knock on wood, you can mitigate almost any issue other than not having time. If you have people waiting on you, you've got some other place you got to be, you're on your lunch break, during work, you know, anything that's going to tighten up that window, you're starting right before the midnight hour UTC, that's going to be your biggest hurdle. You can fix almost any problem if you have time. As much as you can, give yourself as big a window as possible. All right, an obvious one here. Always consider your surroundings and the type of place that you're going to go. I tend to be going in different places all the time, so I'm constantly having to think, what am I going to need? One thing that's always on my list is bear spray. About 10% of the parks I go to, I'm going to need bear spray. Wow. All the other times, I just cross it off. But otherwise, I make sure I got bear spray. Make sure you've got everything you need and make a detailed list of all the things you need to keep yourself safe and healthy wherever you're activating. I would suggest when you get out on your site to find a location that is slightly removed from where other people tend to be. I don't want to be right in the middle of everybody's business. I want to be kind of off in the periphery. I don't want my activities to imprint on anyone else's experience. If they see me and they're interested, they can approach me and I'll talk to them as long as they want. But I don't want to be right there in the middle of everyone's business, making noise, whether it's I'm shouting in the microphone or you know, I'm pounding brass and you can hear bleeps and bloops. I think I found a good spot out of the way here. I got a few, but everyone goes right up to the yards to take pictures. So I should be out of the way.
Roger, under 73, Georgia.
Kilo Echo 0 Victor India Mike, park to park, park to park. I generally try to stay removed to a certain extent. Yeah, I'm there, but again, that's me, that's my activation. For other people, it's very important to be very visible and be approached and be asked about ham radio. Okay. Another smart thing to check before you leave, which is something I've also added to my checklist, is to make sure I've got all the information that I need to share with my hunters. What's my park number? What county am I going to be in? What's the name of the park? I try to get all those things written down, or I at least find it on my phone, and I'll take a screenshot of the park label that's got the name and the number, so I'll have that in the field, because a lot of times I get out in the field, I don't know if I'm going to have cell signal or not, or I know I'm not going to have cell signal. I'm in trouble if I don't have the information. Okay, let's talk about the big one, mic fright. Okay, this is something that absolutely everyone deals with. Maybe there's a few rare exceptions that can just pick up that microphone and stop talking, but most all of us deal with this issue of just the guts to push that button and start talking. It's normal. Don't worry about it. And it's going to take you several activations to kind of get over that hump. You will get there. And, you know, the speed at which you get there will depend on the frequency at which you activate. If it really bugs you, try to activate a bunch of times over the course of a month. You know, try to get 20, 30 activations in maybe, just to get over that hump so you don't feel that anymore. And as soon as you try a new mode like CW, guess what? It comes right back. Let's talk about spotting. All right, this is a big one. Spotting is one of those things that a lot of people take a little too seriously. I've seen some people think that they think that an activation doesn't count unless it's spotted. And they'll ask that. Well, I never spotted myself. Does my activation even count? How does anyone even know that I was out there? And then there's folks that think if they can't spot themselves, there's no way they're ever going to get found. There's no way they're ever going to be able to complete an activation. All right, I try to go for the middle of the road on this one. Spotting is a tool that's fine to use, but you also want to have the skill to be able to be found if you can't spot. So I guess my best advice would be to practice activating, even times when you have cell signal, practice every once in a while activating without spotting. Okay, what am I going to do differently? Well, I'll probably choose a different band. I would probably locate myself differently on that band. Okay, if I was going to work on 12 meters and spot myself, if I can't spot myself, I'm probably not going to start on 12 meters. I'm going to want to go something like 20 or maybe 40, depending on the time of day, something that's busy. I'm going to find another activator and I'm going to nudge up right close to them. So we don't, just enough so we don't interfere with each other at all. But any hunters working that other activator, if they tune my direction, they're going to hear me right below or right above. That's generally what I do. And that's just a good thing to practice, so you know you can do it at a time where you show up and for whatever reason you don't have signal. Another trick I'll use when I am not spotted and I want to be found is I will use long repetitive calls. I want to make a lot of noise. CQ, CQ, Parks on the Air, Kilo Echo 0, Victor India Mike from US 0030, Grand Canyon National Park in Northern Arizona. CQ, CQ, Parks on the Air, Kilo Echo 0, Victor India Mike. Listen a few seconds. CQ, CQ, Parks on the Air, Kilo Echo 0, Victor India Mike. I'm going to go right back into it again, and I'm going to go, and I'm only going to leave 3, 4, 5 seconds of gap in there, and I'm going to start going again because I don't want to give anyone the opportunity to tune over my frequency and not hear my voice. And after they hear me go through that once or twice, they're going to learn they need to jump. If there's a hunter there, they're going to learn they need to jump right in as soon as they hear me cut that off because I'm going to go right back into my spiel again. But I'm going to make a lot of noise and a lot of consistent noise so no one can pass over me. Or if someone's looking at the waterfall, it looks like something serious is going on right there. On the other hand, I talked about the issue of time being the number one thing that can blow up an activation, that narrow window of time. And spotting is an incredible tool to beat that. It seems like a lot of activations I've done lately, I've had a smaller window than I would prefer. And that's where Sodomate comes in so handy for my activations. Again, my activations. And generally what that does for me when I have that tight window is I can call CQ, and most of the time, the first time, by the time I send that spot through FT8 for 3 straight cycles, so 45 seconds to a minute, people have had time to see my spot and get on frequency. And by the time I get the 3 transmissions done and I get back on my activating frequency, I call CQ one time, they're there waiting for me on the first call. That's happened so many times. I have videos showing that happening on the very first call. It's a great tool. Learn it, utilize it. Also learn the skill of being able to activate without spotting. Be able to do both. For your first activation, I highly recommend that you log on paper. Generally, if you're going out for your first activation, most people are going to be using some software program that they're not as familiar with. Okay, we might be using Hammers or Polo for the first time. And that's just not something that you want to be fooling with when your brain is also trying to think about what to do on your first activation. You want on your first activation to just be able to concentrate on what's going on through your radio. And I don't want to worry about logging. And if I can write on paper with a pencil, that's something I've been doing since I was a baby, and I don't have to think about it. It doesn't take up any bandwidth in my brain, and everything is available just to do the radio stuff. And in your first activation, you're probably going to need all of your bandwidth just to do the radio stuff. So get comfortable activating first while logging on paper, and then pretty soon you're going to start making so many contacts, it's going to get kind of annoying to import them into a computer program afterwards. That's your moment. That's your moment right there to think, okay, now I'm ready to start logging on a computer in the field during the activation. Okay, this next one's kind of obvious, but let's talk about it a little bit. Checking to make sure there's a clear frequency. So you'll hear phone guys all the time say, is this frequency is in use? Is this frequency in use? KE0VIM, is this frequency in use? Code guys will send QRL question mark, asking the same thing. Is this frequency in use? And, give it a few times. Okay, I used to have a problem when I was calling for a clear frequency. Not that I wouldn't do it. I would interpret any sort of extra little noise or sound as, oh my gosh, somebody's there. And I think I heard a lot of ghosts. So I learned and gained some confidence over time that if it wasn't obviously a voice, I was going to go ahead and start calling. Now, it'll happen a lot of times so that you'll say, is the frequency in use? Is the frequency in use? 2, 3, 4 times, give them time, wait and see. Okay, now I'm going to spot myself. Now I'm going to start calling CQ POTA. And guess what happens? Someone starts talking right then. They choose that moment to say, oh, yeah, I'm on this frequency. Okay, it would have been nice if you'd have told me, 2-3 minutes ago before I got this deep into it, but, whatever. That happens. But over some time, I gained a little confidence in learning that I had to clearly hear a voice. If I don't clearly hear a voice, or it could be a quiet voice, but if it's clearly a voice that I can just barely hear, then I know someone's there. There's all kinds of when you're nervous about it like I was, there's all kinds of little sounds and things that your brain will invent inside that static, within the static, and you'll hear ghosts. You've probably experienced this some already as a hunter, I would expect, but most activators expect, and hunters really, I think, expect to exchange a signal report and a state. Okay, now don't get hung up on it. If you can't hear what their signal report is, don't worry about it too much. Even if you need if it's a park to park and they have a park number, it really doesn't matter. All you need is their call sign. That's the only thing you really need. So if they're way down in the noise and you're having a real hard time picking them out, just keep in mind, you don't need all that extra information. It's nice, but it's not necessary to count as a contact. You just need the call sign. All right, so let's talk about the dreaded pileups.
This is Kilo Mike 9 Golf QRZ. Station beginning November 4, please.
Pileups are something that you will get used to and you will get to enjoy and look forward to and get excited and say, okay, here they come. You will get to that point. A lot of folks are a little nervous about it at the beginning. It's fine. It's normal. There are strategies that you can take to reduce the risk of a pileup when you're out for your first activations. Okay, so let's talk about those for a little bit. What band you choose, how much power that you run, what kind of mode that you're using. All these things can help you deal with a pileup. One thing that's nice about FT8, you can get a pileup on FT8. You're only going to be able to deal with one at a time. A pileup in FT8 just seems a little less of an affront as it does with Morse code or voice. Something to consider. You can also run less power. If you've got a 100-watt radio, maybe you start only running 10 watts. If you're out west here, maybe you start at 20 watts and start calling and see if you get any hits. If not, maybe you start bumping it up a little bit then. Maybe you bump it up to 50 watts and just go to where you can start making a few contacts. And if it feels like it's starting to get a little busy, you can dial that power back again. That's one way that you can control it. But of course, the ultimate thing is just to get comfortable with it, to get to where you enjoy the pileups. There's really nothing to worry about. Just concentrate on trying to pick out part of a call sign. If there's someone loud in there and I can pick out the whole call sign, I will start maybe by taking a few of those and getting them off the top, and I can work them really fast. Just give them a 5-9 and move on. And I'll keep it short. I'll give the full call sign and the report. So if I hear, Alpha 1, Alpha Bravo Charlie, I'll call back and I'll say Alpha 1, Alpha Bravo Charlie, you're 5-9 Arizona. They'll come back with my report. Now, when it comes back to me, I'll say, hey, thanks for the contact, 7-3. Kilo Echo 0 Victor, and Mike parks on the air. Go right into the next call, and I'll try to work them a little bit quicker that way. So that can take a few loud ones right off the top, and that makes it a little easier to be able to hear the people that are underneath. And then, after a few of those, then you might get to the point where you're trying to pick up pieces of a call sign. Okay, I heard someone's call sign start with a Victor Echo, or someone ended in Charlie. Whatever you can hear and pick out, do that. Don't get in a rush. This is what I still work on, is I just try to get in too much of a hurry when things get busy, and I'm constantly having to tell myself to slow down. This is one of those situations where smooth is fast, and if you try to hurry, you're going to end up being slower. Smooth is fast. I tell my 11-year-old son all the time, if you just did it a little bit slower, you'd probably do it a lot better. Take a breath every now and then and just keep working it. Get into a nice rhythm. You'll get to where you enjoy it. And it's cool to only work for an hour and get over 100 contacts. You'll enjoy that. Okay, so what about when you want to start to wrap things up? Well, there's this little trick where you just say, Kilo Echo 0 Victor India Mike for Parks on the Air, last call. I'm making last call. KE0VIM, last call. I have two reasons I do this. One, it's because I need to quit. Time's up. or I just don't hear anyone calling, so I'm just ready to be done. And rather than just disappearing or calling QRT, I'll extend the courtesy of saying, hey, if anybody's on there waiting right now, give me a shout right now because I'm about to leave. And that'll usually drum up a few. Or maybe you have no intention of leaving. It's a great way to drum up some contacts. If you've called a few times and things are getting slow, try lying and saying, oh, this is my last call. And I bet you'll get somebody to come up and answer you, and then you can maybe get on a little bit of a roll again. That works quite a few times. That's becoming less and less of a problem, though, as POTA just continues to get more and more popular. You're generally trying to find ways to slow things down as opposed to trying to get calls to come in. So what I used to do before I became a full-time traveler is I worked for a landscaping design build firm. It was a nursery in Wichita, and I would sell designs to our customers and then manage our crews to go out and install them. I was also a foreman for a crew as well. And I'll tell you the same thing I would tell my crew or my foremen that were working for me when I was the designer. Always do a final walk around. Always do what I would call the foreman's walk. So when all the shovels and the wheelbarrows and all the equipment and everything's loaded back up in the truck, let your boys go up in the truck and sit for a minute. You go walk around the yard again and make sure there's nothing else. There's not a rake laying around or a hose that didn't get coiled back up with the customers or something like that. Just go back and make sure everything's just absolutely perfect before you take off and leave. Same thing with your activation. When you get everything picked up and put away, go walk around the picnic table that you were working at or where you had your chair set up out in the woods. Go walk around where your antenna was set up to make sure there's not a bundle of radial wires sitting out there or something like that. Give it one more final look. You know, it's important that you get out into the field with everything. It's more important you get back from the field with everything. And I generally try to leave everything at least as good, if not better, than how I found it. This is another one of those obvious things. But we are kind of visible when we're out there working in the field. And if someone that was sitting at a picnic bench before me left a can of Coke sitting out, and then I go work at that picnic table and I leave, other people saw me sitting there, that has become my can of Coke that ham radio operator left out there, and that's a mark you're leaving on all of us. So that's where we say, leave it better than you found it. I still remember one of the first places we ever went when we started traveling full time was we camped on a beach in Louisiana. And I saw a prospector. Someone was metal detecting out on the beach. And I saw them digging in this one spot. And they dug and dug and dug and dug. And eventually they put it all back and didn't find, they didn't find anything, didn't pull anything out of it. But it still seemed like they thought something was there. So at that time I had a metal detector as well. I went back out to that same spot and I saw where they were digging, and I waved my metal detector over it. Sure enough, that thing was still there. So I started digging. And what I found was a smashed aluminum can in the hole that they had dug up. They dug up hoping to find a piece of jewelry or a little coin or something, and all they found was a piece of trash, and they put it back in the ground and covered it up with sand. And guess what? I still remember that. I still remember that metal detector put trash back in there. That is imprinted in my brain, and that's what I don't want to do to someone else for a ham radio operator. Leave it better than you found it. All right, folks, I hope that helps you out. Please feel free to drop any questions down in the comments, especially these how to activate videos I'm doing. We're expecting newer operators with very simple beginner questions. There's nothing to feel self-conscious about. Drop the question down here and you'll get an answer relatively quickly. Beyond that, the best tip I can give you is just to get out there and get that first one done. You'll probably love it. I'm Mike, Kilo Echo Zero, Victor India Mike, and maybe I'll be hunting you. See you soon. Okay, folks, here's the deal. I'm at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. This is gonna be a special one of the most intense trails. This is the operating station. That's a bear.
Wow. Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
The traveler has
I just do things.
He was a huge, beastly, bulging man. Plates were from Kansas.